I made a complaint because the prison laundry lost my clothes.
Basically, I complained because I wanted a laptop in my cell to aid me in my studies, and I was told I couldn't have one.
I complained because every time I was going to get my meds, because everybody was just queued up one behind the other, people was overhearing what meds I was on. It made life difficult for me, and that's why I complained.
We consider complaints from anybody who's in custody. What we hope to do is to provide a service to complainants so that they feel that their complaints are considered by an outside body.
If you've got a case that you want to be heard and you want it to be dealt with objectively and somebody who's not going to be biased or take anyone's side, then you would go to somebody like the Ombudsman, because that's exactly what they do. They look at things fairly. You know, they're not on, it's not like us against them.
You can only use the Ombudsman after you have actually, you know, exhausted all the other complaints processes.
Whenever a prisoner complains at an establishment and remains dissatisfied, it comes to us to look at and to consider. And we put a fresh pair of eyes on it, just to see whether the decision that the prisoner's made is fair and reasonable and the right one.
I would describe the Ombudsman as people who are prepared to listen to you. Yeah, they're neutral, they don't take sides, they look at each case for what it is and will deal with it on its merit.
I filed a complaint because I took my clothes, my outside clothes, my personal belongings, to the laundry to be washed, you know, so when I have visits and that, I can look fresh and clean. They told me to come back for my stuff on afternoon association. So I've gone to pick up my clothes, and I've got there, and they're telling me my clothes are not there. So I'm saying, well, you're responsible because I've given you my clothes, and you're telling me they're not there, so what happens next, you know? And it was like, there's no answer. I need my clothes, you understand? So I filed a complaint.
Although this was a relatively small amount of clothing, it was very important to the prisoner because it was his identity, if you like, within the prison.
The governor said, well, you know, there's nothing really we can do. You know, if you've handed in your clothes, it's kind of your responsibility. And I'm like, well, how can it be my responsibility? I've got no kind of control over what happens in the laundry. So I phoned the Ombudsman, and they said they will investigate the case.
I contacted the wing manager, who explained that there was a private arrangement between prisoners because it was their own clothing, and they could not be responsible if one prisoner had lost another prisoner's clothing. Really, he had no alternative but to use the wing laundry. There simply weren't enough machines for the prisoners to wash their clothes themselves. By coming to the Ombudsman, they had the benefit of an outside person judging what was reasonable, and in this case it was not reasonable to require prisoners to use the prison laundry without any sort of guarantee that they get their clothes back.
They upheld my case, you know, so I was victorious in that, and they said what they're going to do is that the prison are going to have to reimburse me for the worth of my clothing, which was great. And what that meant is that the prison actually started taking more care of people's clothes, because they don't want to be forking out money every week for clothes that goes missing. So it didn't just help me, you know, but I like to think that I made a change now for the whole of the prison. And I walk around the wing now, and everyone's giving me a high five because they know their clothes are safe. You understand? So it's good, man, I'm happy.
My complaint was about the usage of an in-cell laptop computer. I'm studying computer animated design, and I feel I could put my time to better use if I've got the use of a laptop in my cell to forward my career, basically, for when I leave prison.
It was a genuine complaint. The prisoner had a valid reason for wanting the laptop in his cell. His request was supported by the Education Department, and he'd secured the funds himself to procure a laptop.
I just thought it would be a great idea if I could get a computer in my cell, and, you know, with all the modifications to it that I can get, you know, it's got no Wi-Fi, it's got no internet access, and which I've paid for myself through funding and charities. I presented that to the prison, and the prison wasn't happy with it, basically. I made a complaint through the formal complaint system. To no avail. Spoke to wing governors and nothing came of it. Eventually I found out about the Ombudsman and made my complaint.
When I visited the prisoner who made the complaint, I was very impressed by his attitude to his studies and was left in no doubt that he would have made good use of the laptop if one had been allowed. I also visited and spoke to his tutor in the education department, who was very impressed with the work that he's been doing, and I also spoke to the tutor about the desktop equipment that was available to him. The prison authorities had carried out a risk assessment and made a decision that they wouldn't change their policy allowing laptops in cells for all the prisoners. The prisoners themselves said on this particular occasion they didn't have the resources to ensure that the laptops were being used appropriately. For security reasons, he wouldn't be allowed the use of that laptop.
I made my complaint to the Ombudsman and it wasn't upheld. I wasn't happy about it, but I think it was definitely worth doing because through doing it I've got a better understanding as to why I'm not allowed to have it, and that's, you know, that helps me a lot with how I feel in my head.
It was a finely balanced call. In many ways I would have liked to have supported the prisoner in his grievance. I decided that we couldn't and we had to support the prison stance. I sent a letter out explaining that decision, explaining the rationale to the prisoner, and hopefully he could get a good appreciation on why, on this occasion, we couldn't support his complaint.
You've got to have one rule for everyone, and if I had been given a computer, then other people might have wanted one. I understand that in prison you have to do things equally, fairly, so that's how they've done it.
What I would say to that prisoner is if he had other grievances about different things in the future, don't hesitate to come forward to us again.
TN 6570. Well, I was receiving my medication, as you do, at the same time every night. Because there's no privacy and everybody just queues up together, the people behind me heard what medication I was taking and therefore knew what illness I was suffering from.
Her complaint was as simple as when she was being administered medicine from healthcare, that it wasn't confidential.
And therefore I was ridiculed, made fun of, talked about, which was quite distressing. It's distressing enough being in prison, having to go through that as well. The Ombudsman came to see me quite quickly, told me that they would get back to me and they would look into the situation, which they did.
I did actually go to the wing and saw that there was no privacy line.
And it was as simple as asking the prison to draw a line on the floor. But whilst that may seem almost trivial, from the prisoner's point of view, it was very important because it put confidentiality back.
You know, I can speak freely to the nurse without any fear of being heard and being ridiculed for it. So it was a simple thing, but it made a big difference. And I'm not the only one who's happy about it. A lot of women are very happy about it.
To communicate that to the prisoner, if you'd be able to put that in writing.
Often the complaint to us is the prisoner's last way of expressing their voice. And it's very important from their point of view that they've got someone else and to look at this complaint on their behalf.
I did have to go through a few channels to get an end result, but in the end I did get a result, and it's nice to know that there's somebody that you can go to who will fight on your behalf and, you know, take it seriously, your complaint, and now something has been done about it. I'm quite glad, I'm very glad about that.
If I had one piece of advice for prisoners making complaints, I would say be honest up front, and wherever possible try and be concise. We deal with a lot of complaints here. It will help us to look at the case that you're making in your complaint and deal with it more speedily and more effectively.
I think you need the Ombudsman to be fair, reliable, and you need them to listen. And, you know, they've done all them things with me.
Sometimes it can be dealt with by landing staff, POSO, but if it does have to go to the Ombudsman, they do look into it, and if your case is valid, then something is done.
This gives you self-esteem in a funny kind of way. It gives you confidence as well to be able to communicate and know that you can go through those channels and be heard, and your voice can make a change.